So I'll open it up. Thank you. And we'll start with student enrollment projections. It's the first thing we want to talk about.
Yes, we look at these every year at this time, and this year I added a document into board docs, and there are two different projections. So the first one is
Ian Pilak.
Join the meeting.
sorry, I had to get used to that. The first box on this sheet, or page 1, has the cohort survival method, and that's the method that this district's used for a really long time. A lot of school districts do. And so what that one does is it looks at the last 5 years of enrollment data and averages it out and then carries it forward using a survival method. And this is the head count of students. So it's the actual students that we have in seats. And so just kind of like we've talked about for several years now, we are looking at declining enrollment. This shows declining enrollment each year. I think the interesting thing to look at here is that, yeah, the graduating classes are getting smaller generally. There's a little bit of up and down there. Generally, they're going down. And generally, our younger classes like kindergarten are getting a little bit smaller over time with a few variations up and down again. So we usually see a bump in 9th grade, so from 8th to 9th grade. And this method keeps that, which I think is good. Even though it's declining, you still see that there are bumps in the 9th grade in the projections moving forward. So anyway, this is just a tool. I mean, we're dealing with people and people can do what they want. They can move in, they can move out, but it's kind of our best guess. And this first one is what we're using in the forecast model. I included the other one just to show kind of how they turn out differently. So this is another option that a lot of districts use, and it's just called the cast forward method. And it literally just takes one grade and moves it to the next grade all the way through. And that shows us declining at a much faster rate. I personally think the other one is probably a little closer to accurate just because it does account for our increase in the 9th grade. And just looks, I think it adds a few students back in, which we typically see, like some kids move out, some kids move in. And then I included here at the bottom just a note that these both are dealing with the head count. And the head count is what we're reporting to DPI twice a year, but it is not the number that is used to determine the revenue limit. That is it's called membership, and the formula for that is also on the sheet.
Are there any questions on this? This was just for, FYI type stuff. Craig had none. Craig, you got any questions?
Sarah, your screen is not actually sharing the content that you're talking about, and also the video that you're sharing is completely blurred out. If you're able to, I think that's just like an accidental screen blur thing. The actual video of the boardroom. But yeah, then the video you're sharing is not the growth projection and student enrollment projection content. It's looks like the dashboard for the boardroom center sharing thing.
Yeah, that's what Tyler helped me set up here. I don't know that I can share through here if Libby's on.
Sharing anything. I think you just have Zoom up.
Yeah, I do. I have Zoom up, but it doesn't. Oops. It's like a share within a share. Here.
We'll give it just a minute here, see if we can get the technical difficulties ironed out.
Oops. Yeah, I don't know why it won't let me share through Zoom.
I got a hammer in the truck if you think it will help.
Oh, maybe now it will. Right.
Yeah, it's sharing the agenda screen that you have there. That works.
Hey, are you guys okay if it's not on Vivi?
Yeah, no, I got it on my computer.
Because that's where we go wrong, then it kicks me out again. Okay, so Sam, I'll pull that up just so you can see it here for a minute. I also included in here that Roffers report that we got a while back as a part of that demographic study, just to kind of look at and see too. That does not go year by year, it gives it in chunks. But it also is showing that projection of declining enrollment at least until 2035. But so this first one is the cohort survival method, and this is the head count of students. And then on the second page is the cast forward method.
Um, Hey, Sarah, this is David. And after the last meeting, I think on Monday, Craig, I still can't find the raise my hand icon on my screen, but I Googled it. And if you hit Alt Y, it will raise your hand.
Oh,
So
there you
I just raised my hand because I knew how I could. So I'm going to now Alt Y and take my hand down. But that being said, Sarah, these projections are, I'll say, entirely academic, right? I mean, I know that we had some demographic information that might have been factored into it, but the cohort survival, as well as this is mostly, okay, I'll call it macro data. And here's my next question along with it. Last Wednesday, I was at a presentation where the mayor, I believe the number was 600 new housing units, you know, what do you want to call it? Doors, not necessarily pillows, but doors. That were in the works being considered under development in the city over the next 2 to 3 years. And I'm not counting eggs before they hatch, but is anything of that nature factored into this as far as how 600 new units, if they all come to fruition, might possibly impact our projections?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is not in this table. It is in the Roffers report. So Roffers had a formula of like single family homes, multi-family homes, apartment complexes. There's a mathematical equation of how many students that's likely to give the district. And so they have that all in that report. And it wasn't as big of a number as maybe I would think that it would be. And it also, they don't think it's going to start giving us an increase, even if all the housing comes to fruition the way that it's being planned right now. They don't think it's going to result in an increase in net enrollment until about 2035. So they're projecting we keep declining until then, and then we should start to see a slow increase at the elementary level specifically, hopefully into the 2040s. But even at that, if you look at the Roffers report, which I don't know if I can pull that up here, but there was a nice table on there, and even at that, it shows in 2040, there's some student growth. We're still significantly fewer students than we were in like 2018-19. So it's just going to take a really long time, even if we were to get a lot of new housing, to come back to any sort of numbers that we were even 10 years ago. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Okay, so that the general answer is then it is partially factored in, and when it factors in, it doesn't factor in to any appreciable impact within the next 3 to 5 years.
Not statistically, but again, it's so hard to say because we're dealing with people and people are so unpredictable. I mean, maybe there's 600 houses and all those people have three new kids. I mean, it's hard to say, but
Okay,
it does
no,
look
thanks.
good.
I just didn't know if it was just taking general macro data from the state, or if it was factoring in actual boots on the ground building permits.
Yeah.
So I'd say somewhere in between.
I would agree, yes.
Sam, do you have any questions?
No, I would say that, having looked over the material that's being presented here, which I always greatly appreciate, trying to provide us with as much data as possible, it does seem like there's a pretty significant blind spot, I guess I would call it. This focuses a lot on declining birth rates as reason for enrollment. But I think that, one of the things that we've seen happening consistently since really around 2020 and really 2022 is decline in people's trust for institutions. And I mean, a Gallup poll just came out. I think it was yesterday or just in the last few days, talking about how there is a continued decline and there is not an improvement in the way that people feel about the public school system. It's still sitting like around 26% of the population feels that way. So, I mean, I hear a lot of this all the time from people in town, and there's a real issue with people saying, I'm just not comfortable with sending my kids to public school. And I think that's really something that we're going to need to address if we want enrollment to look good in the future. I think that you can build all the houses you want, but ultimately people are trying to look for other places to send their kids. And unless we build trust in the public school system, I don't think that's going to happen.
I think that that's a fair point, and I do think if you look at Roffers, they did look at private school enrollment and homeschool, and you will see private schools in general, like as an aggregate in our district, are also seeing declining enrollment. But homeschooling has gone up, like percentage-wise significantly. Numbers-wise, it's still small compared to the total. But I do think that that's a fair point, and I think the state overall, and actually the whole country, has seen an increase in homeschooling. And that's just the numbers that we know, not even including students that start as homeschooled students. Those are only students that we know of because they were enrolled and then they move out to homeschool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I noticed that as well. I did see that they didn't really take into account the closure of private schools. And if you take into account the closure of private schools in our area, I think the number of private school enrollment declining or whatever, I'm sorry, I'm getting lost in that sentence. The number of people that the private school enrollments is declining by is actually a lot slimmer than that, because a huge portion of the number that they have in that report is reliant on those closures. So former enrollment positions that no longer exist because the schools themselves don't exist. But yeah, that's just kind of a comment I had on there.
Thanks, Sam. Greg, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just gonna make the same kind of point that, I mean, with the exception of at least one particular school that closed, all of the others, well, I mean, some schools had some minor decreases in enrollment, others actually experienced some significant growth. So there's that trend on some of those schools is probably likely to continue. But it's an interesting point.
All right. Thank you. We're gonna move into the 5-year financial projection.
I looked at this a couple months ago, and to date, not a whole lot of things have changed as far as what we know for sure for next year's budget. We do know that the CPI amount is set at 2.95%, which is just a little less than what was originally in the projection. I had 3%. And I have included now in the updated forecast the reduction of $1.5 million over 3 years. So if we look at the assumption sheet,
Okay.
that is the sheet that we also looked at a couple months ago, and I've made some updates in here. So the first section all stayed the same. I did not change anything with the state. The enrollment is the cast forward method that we just looked at. No other changes there. Our big unknowns for next year are going to mainly be on the revenue side of things. So the state is going to have a new biennial budget. Just last night, Governor Evers presented that. So I do know some of the things that he's proposing, the big things in there. Actually, there were a lot of big proposals in there. And so if any one of the things that he is putting forth in his budget passed, it would be impactful on the district. So there were several large things. One was, of course, increasing the special education reimbursement rate, which we've talked about before at meetings. It's at, they say 33% right now. They are requesting moving it to 60% and making it a sum sufficient amount. And so That's why I say they say 33%. What we really see happening is in the 20s, because it's a pot of money right now that's getting distributed. And so from my experience, we've never had the full percentage that they say. It always really runs more like 27, 28%, not 33. So if they really did change it to 60, and then that was a guaranteed amount, that would be a huge impact for the district. There's also a revenue limit per pupil increase in there, and I did quick math on that, that if that worked out, that would be about $1 million for the district. There's an increase to the per pupil categorical aid, which hasn't changed for several years. That's a smaller number, probably more like $190,000. And then there's also a proposal to increase the low revenue ceiling again. And that's where we have seen some like pretty decent increases, because this district is always at the low revenue ceiling. So if that got bumped to $12,000 after it was bumped to 11, that would be a big impact. And that would probably be about $2 million for us. So it's still obviously early days. We have no idea what part's going to get approved and what's not, but any one of those things would make a difference for us in the upcoming years.
Sarah,
Yes.
when it comes to that particular situation, where they bump they change the low revenue ceiling, is that an automatic thing, or does the board have to approve to levy up to that?
It would be, it's an automatic thing. So what they're saying is that's the lowest amount that a school district can get per student.
Okay,
It was $9,000 for several years. It got bumped to 10,000. When that happened, Watertown got bumped to 10,000. And 2 years ago, it got bumped to 11,000. And when that happened, we got bumped to 11,000.
that's a state aid thing, or is that a local levy?
That's literally, when we talk about the revenue limit and what the state says we can have for
Right.
revenue, that's what that is.
Okay,
So it's the levy and the aid. So they say, okay, the
Okay.
maximum or the minimum amount you can have per student is $11,000. Then that goes into the revenue limit formula, and all those other factors come into play to see how much of that is state aid and how much of that is property taxes.
okay, so if they increase that amount, that just takes effect regardless of any involvement that we have.
Right. That's a good question.
Any other questions? That was a good question. Thanks for that, Craig.
Sure. Mike, Sarah, I scanned through these assumptions, nothing in there about Act 10 repeal.
Yeah, I haven't really factored in Act 10 yet. I listened to an update again today. There is a stay on that right now. And it just seems really unknown still what exactly is going to happen with that and who it really is going to impact. So I haven't really put that in here, but that is a good point. I mean, that could change things in upcoming years for sure, particularly with benefits, things like that.
Yeah, I was just speaking, to lack of a better word, political, I don't want to call it an operative, but somebody who pays attention. And his comment was, is if Schimmel wins the Supreme Court seat, then it stays Act 10. If Crawford wins, then it likely gets repealed. The question is how much does collective bargaining affect us in your assumptions should Act 10 get repealed? And I don't know if that just affects the CPI and the raises, or if it affects the insurance, and we have to go back to whoever that was, WEAC or whatever it was. And of course, what the timeline is. And it's entirely based on, well, I shouldn't say based on, the person I was talking to said, well, you know what can and can't happen based on who gets elected. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it will. And of course, we don't know how it will impact us, even if it does change. But I didn't know how you were reading the tea leaves.
I try to just stay calm on this one. There are some people that are not, but you know, we're talking about
Stay calm. I like that.
It really could potentially be impactful for sure. But in my view, what it does is it changes what levers the district has over the budget, if that makes sense. So yeah, we might have to bargain more things. We may have to pay more, we may have to pay more benefits, and then that probably will have to come from someplace else, if that makes sense. So that's the way that I look at it. I'm not really, concerned about it, I guess I would say at this point. I'm a little.
Well, they always say worry is the most useless emotion, in which case, no, I can appreciate you're not worried because it is what it is and we'll deal with it when it comes. I just didn't know if there was any, what do you want to call factoring, or hedging of bets, included in your budgeting.
So far, I've just been including up to the CPI and then trying to project forward on that. And then we know our health insurance increases are going to be bigger no matter what. So I've been putting those projections in. As far as like WRS, I haven't done anything to change that. I'm just keeping that rate like what we're expecting it to be. I haven't like doubled that or anything like that. But I mean, that would be hugely impactful if that were to happen.
Okay. Yeah, I just got my health renewal at 6.9% and I was actually celebrating.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good.
But to expound on that, I think my logical question would be that regardless of whether or not Act 10 is repealed or stays in place, that doesn't necessarily change the fact that the district only has a set amount of revenue, and that's not going to change in that equation, according to the state, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so those are the things that, so potentially as a district, one could bargain for more benefits or whatever the case may be, and that number could change. Our expense column could go up, but the revenue column is still the same. So that usually means that in order to trade off for those expenses, something else has to give. So, I don't know, we'll have to see.
It's a really, really interesting year. I mean, it's always a guessing game to a certain extent, like what the revenue is going to be, but now the federal revenue is also a question which I've never experienced before, so it's hard to say what will happen with that. Like Title I, we get $600,000, Title II, we get $100,000, and we've heard even before the election that those two could potentially go away, so that would be a big deal for us. IDEA, we get over $1.2 million for, Title IV is $50,000. I don't believe food service is going to be impacted. This is what I've heard anyway, no matter what happens, but that's like a significant amount of money for the district too. So those federal funds being a question for the upcoming years, that's a new unknown for me. And then I'm hoping that if that were to happen, we are going to get some offset from the state. So hopefully one of these things at the state level does happen. But it really is, there's a lot of uncharted territory right now and a lot of things that we just don't know. And it's probably all going to go through the court system for a long time. So we might not really know for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's their assumption in itself. Any other questions?
Specific to the assumptions?
Financial projections, yeah, the assumptions or the projection itself.
The 5-year projections, I guess my question would be, why don't we, is there a particular reason why we don't try to project with the fund balance amount set as a fixed variable, then that it's not supposed to dip below 15%? Because that would be board policy that we're to strive to maintain a fund balance of 15%.
Well, that's a good question. So this forecast shows no referendum passing, no increased funding from the state. Federal revenues stay the same. Act 10 is not really a factor. We have declining enrollment. And we're reducing by $1.5 million. This is what we would be looking at roughly. And also keep in mind, these are not this is a forecast, so it's a tool, it's helpful. It comes in close. Typically, as a district, we've been coming in, not quite to the deficits that we project out, which is good, so that's a good thing. But,
But,
this is without doing anything else. So if we wanted to keep our fund balance at 15%,
yeah,
we would need to pass a referendum, number one. If a referendum does not pass, there would be other things that would need to happen.
well, I disagree with some of what you're saying in the sense that, when we project out, if we're trying to maintain a fund balance of 15%, that would imply that there would need to be some steeper cuts that need to happen in order for us to maintain that 15% fund balance. So in essence, to maintain staff levels that we potentially can't afford, and then end up having to borrow additional dollars to cover our short-term obligations at an expense doesn't make sense to me. So why would we project out without that assumption baked in?
Are you making the assumption that we're gonna fail the referendum? I mean, and that's.
Well, I think this is what that assumes too.
This is trying to just simply show why we need the referendum,
Yeah,
more
this
or
is a-
less. This is the
Without
point of this.
referendum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Well-
yeah,
Well, even so, even without the referendum, we would strive not to violate board policy. So if we're doing that, why would we project out something that's not realistic? I
I
mean,
guess I don't totally understand the question.
So-
So you
so-
would only want to see a projection
Well-
that shows cuts to get to be at 15%.
so if we're,
That wouldn't be a projection of what's happening. That would be a projection of what we were going to do, I suppose.
right, so if the administration's intention is to come to the board and ask for a $1.5 million in reductions, this is what they're assuming. This is what the administration would be assuming. I would say that perhaps maybe the administration should make the assumption that we're going to maintain a fund balance of 15%. And perhaps maybe there's a deeper reduction that needs to occur over the next
If
3
we don't
years.
pass a referendum, that's exactly what will happen. But right now, that's what we're trying to do.
Right,
We've discussed that in the past, that if referendum doesn't pass, based on these projections, deeper cuts are definitely happening.
that's what I'm saying, this is, what you're saying, this projection only takes into account the $1.5 million without a referendum passing.
That's right.
Cause that's all we know right now, right?
Right, and that's really because people have been asking, well, why are you asking for $7 million? It's been a pretty common question, and so that's really the point of this, is to show, well, we are requesting $7 million because we genuinely need $7 million. And that would be true even while we're making reductions. Like, as you can see, we will need to make more reductions unless things change on the revenue side.
Okay, well then my next logical question is how are you accounting for in your assumptions the additional cost of money when it comes to short-term borrowing?
I'm not, because I don't know that this is gonna happen yet. We have to see what happens in
This is
April.
not fair necessarily, because the policy does say that if we fall below that 15%, it's on the board to make those changes.
Well,
So that would be, that's on us.
we're talking about it now.
No, I understand that, but we're not there yet, is what I'm saying, is that, and if we get to that point, I mean, again, to the policy, it says that if we do fall below that, and the policy does say as well, districts shall strive to maintain this balance.
Right,
Which I think Sarah is doing. She's pointing out, this is what we need to do, and this is where we are. And if you ask Jared, he'll say, yes, I have these other cuts and this is where we are. That's striving to maintain it.
mhm,
And if we fall below that, then it kicks into the board shall develop a plan to restore the unassigned fund balance. The board shall do the plan.
mhm.
So that comes back to on us if it falls below that. I understand Sarah's projections, but
Right.
again, to Mike's point, these are just projections.
Right.
And we should go with, this is the realistic, if we don't pass this, without this, this is the numbers we have.
Correct.
And then we have to look at that, when we get to that point, we're not there yet.
So-
This is certainly not a recommendation of what should happen. Nobody
No,
thinks that.
no, I get that, but
Yeah.
I guess I would like to, I'd be very curious to see what those projections would look like with maintaining a 15% fund balance. What does the board have to be prepared for when it comes to additional cuts that have to be made in order to maintain that?
So are you looking for a number of cuts, or are you looking for the actual cuts? Because if it's a number that we have to hit, if it's like, we have to have this amount of dollars in reductions, that's a Sarah question.
Right,
But if it's, where do we make these cuts? That's a Jared question. Sarah's not gonna make a decision. And then that's-
right, I understand that.
If you're saying to hit that 15% and maintain a 15%
Yeah,
without the referendum, we
right,
have to make another additional $7 million, $12 million in cuts,
right.
But I
Well,
think this kind of shows us, we've got a deficit, this is what we'd have to make cuts in, right? To get this
Exactly.
above that line.
I mean,
So-
this does kind of tell you exactly what you would need to do.
Yeah, cause I'm looking at this and, and if we've got 7 million, then we get 8 million deficit, 10 million deficit, that's the number we gotta get back up to on that. And I think that's already right there.
Yeah.
But as far as where we go and how do we get that, that's a larger discussion and we would need Jared for that.
right, well, I mean, it's on the other side of things though too, is like making sure that we maintain that particular fund balance to reflect what those expenditures have to be in order for us to maintain that. I guess I don't.
Right, no, I agree with what you're saying there, but I mean, I think we really, when we look at this, we got probably a year to have those discussions, and I think getting past April elections lets us have a smarter, or at least a more fact-based, instead of guessing what may happen.
No, I mean, we're in the current year of 2024, 2025. We've
Yeah.
already approved the next year's budget, correct? Or-
We,
year's,
24,
right.
25 is.
Okay, this
yeah.
year's
This year's budget, not next.
Right, 25, 26.
20, okay, so,
We haven't even started down the
Yeah,
road
that's-
yet.
That's months out before we start looking at that.
I mean, we have looked at, a staffing plan was presented at the HR committee Monday night, so that piece is in motion and, that is kind of part one of the budgeting, really.
Well,
of the
Jared's already
process.
looking at $500,000 in cuts or whatever we talked about.
Right, we are.
For next year's budget already, and I'm sure that should the referendum not pass, he's got more in mind, where we're gonna have to.
Yeah, and we did say 500,000 for 25, 26, and we have already identified 742,000, so we have gone over that.
We're, the cuts are starting, right? And I think after we get through April, I think that's when we can really start having deeper discussions and full board or Jared involved in saying, hey, this is,
What's the
what's our
next
plan?
step?
What are our next level?
I mean,
right?
I would prefer to have more of that discussion ahead of time than later.
Sure.
Because
I'm not saying by the first week of May, we shouldn't be having those discussions.
I was gonna say,
But
if that doesn't pass in April,
Mhm.
we will be having that discussion before the end of the month.
yeah. So, but first we gotta see what April brings.
I also, the part of me doesn't like to see reactionary planning. So I'd like to know where we're at.
I don't think we're there, if you ask Jared, he would tell you we're not reactionary, he's already planning, we've got, we've got $740,000 in cuts we're making. I
Mhm.
mean, we're making those steps in that plan, and if you ask Jared, he will tell you, these are the other things that we would need to do. And making those cuts, and again, I don't wanna count. I wanna go into this next month and a half with the feeling of, we're gonna pass this. and these are the cuts we need to make. And hey, I'm looking at the downside of anything type of person, but, at this juncture, going in and, pulling everything out before that is gonna be a waste of time and money, because if it passes, then all of the work that we've done here, that we're doing on that is for naught.
Yeah.
And you're right, Craig, we need to have that information, we need to have that information ahead of time, but I think we've got about halfway there. We've got where, where we've started to with this, and then we will look at the rest after the referendum passes or otherwise. Because if we start looking at it ahead too far early, then we're wasting our time on that just as much as we would if we're planning out, hey, this is automatically gonna pass and this is where everything is. We're kind of in the middle on this right now with projections, because Sarah's just looking at the numbers that we actually have.
It's in the forefront of all of our minds. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but also we have statutory requirements as far as employment. I mean, employment decisions have to be made by April for certified staff. So there is no way to change that for 25, 26. That's the law.
Well, I know, I understand what you're saying. I think that, that the public deserves to have some sort of an understanding of the significance of that, aside from what we've mentioned, 60 to 80 positions being cut potentially. But
Well, 60 to 80, if you math out, comes to that $8 million that we're talking, you know what I mean?
right.
So I think Jared's been having those discussions at
Right.
his briefings, and I know others have been talking about it. I know I've gotten phone calls on it saying, hey, I heard this, and yeah, that's accurate. right?
Well, but
And realistically,
yeah,
we're a school,
right,
Sarah, 70-80% of our budget is salary,
Mhm.
right?
It's the other
So
60.
if you're gonna make cuts, it's, you taking it out of that other 20%, not gonna make it.
right.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, right there, if anybody wants to know, if we have to make reductions, if we have to hit that 15%, 80% right there.
Well,
That's,
And that's letting go about a quarter of the staff.
well,
Yeah,
I mean, or whatever else we can make, because the things about that is you can't just cut. There are efficiencies that can be gained. You can gain money from other places so that you don't have to have all of those reductions in staff.
Right,
Think about how much money that we've saved over insurance in the last 5 years.
sure.
That saved us positions.
Now, is it our position as, I don't know, committee or whatnot, to then recommend to the board, that we just go forward as is with these projections, or do we have more of a comprehensive thought that come April, we're kind of easing into April so that there's potentially a softer blow if the worst happens? Or,
I don't think we're cushioning the blow on this at all.
no, not even
I
close.
mean, is it wise for us to do that?
To not cushion the blow,
Yeah,
I think there has to be realistic on it. I mean,
Yeah.
I will tell you this, all right? The last referendum,
mhm,
I wanted us to not cushion the blow and say, hey, look, this is a realistic what we are. I was told that was scare tactics. There are no scare tactics here. If it doesn't pass, these things will happen.
right,
We're not scaring you. It's going to happen,
Mhm.
And so it's being honest with people, in my opinion. Look, if you want me to tell you that everything's gonna be fine and like this, I'll tell you that, but it's not the truth.
mhm,
The truth is, if you look at the numbers, you look at the last 10 years, you look at what the state aid is for the schools, you look at our CPI increases, there's a huge gap. It's not going to decrease. The
right,
state's not gonna come back with that. We have this deficit. It is not one of our making.
mhm,
And I can tell you right now, this is where we are. This is how much money we will be behind. We took your referendum from the last one that was supposed to go 5 years. We stretched that out past that. We took the money that we got from COVID. We stretched that out farther than we should have.
Yeah.
We are farther along than we should have been.
right,
with what we've had. You know, people, you wanna throw around being good stewards of your money? We're hella good stewards of money. We've done everything we were supposed to and more with that. But it comes to the end of the day that, hey, look, the piggy bank is empty.
Mhm.
So this is where we are. And
Cushioning that blow too.
No,
Pushing the
I
ball.
appreciate the discussion because I just wanna make sure that, you know, we're on the same page when it comes to some
I
of that
agree,
stuff.
yeah.
I mean, realistically, and I think our community all feels similar. If my house is on fire, I don't want them to say they're having a campfire out back. I wanna know how much damage there is and how much water is coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I mean, it's,
Yeah,
you know, I don't think cushioning it, my opinion, it's an opinion. Any other questions, discussions revolving around, our projections? Craig, good comments?
well, I mean, basically, we have to make sure we try to memorialize those discussion points because if, should the worst happen where a referendum does not pass, people are going to come back and look at this and say, well, why didn't you do this then? You know, if you thought that this was a possibility, and quite frankly, you know, if that's the way we're going to
Yeah.
approach it, then
yeah,
it's just the way it is.
yeah.
All right.
All right, now we are gonna talk about our debt prepayment summary.
Yes, during the tax levy in November, so at the budget hearing in October, it was approved to levy some extra funds for Fund 39 so that we could prepay some debt. And this document attached lays out how that prepayment would be applied to our current debt structure. And then it also shows what's listed here is the hypothetical gross savings of 126,800. So that's savings in interest that the district would be paying on this debt. So this is already the amount that has been levied, and this is just showing the proposed prepayment using those funds. If this is something that you approve, it would be a resolution at the board meeting, and it's really a formal resolution, so Coral's drafted this one as well, just like they did for a referendum. And we did this last year too, if you remember. But the other thing I want to point out is how the debt is getting very, very low. Like, we are coming to the end of our Fund 39 debt payments altogether. And then the very last page shows Fund 38 debt. That is debt that did not need a referendum to be passed. And it looks like that was in 2014. That's very, very limited now. So this kind of debt almost doesn't exist anymore, but that also is getting fairly close. I guess this one still has a ways to go. We'll have that paid off by 2031, I think it says there. The numbers are very tiny, but our Fund 39 or referendum debt is getting very close to being paid off. And this prepayment puts us that much closer to that.
So we're making a prepayment. I mean, the recommendation would be to make a prepayment for some of it, the existing debt. For the school improvement bonds and the refunding bonds, right? Where's that money coming from? Or to make
So
those?
this was part of the tax levy that was approved.
Okay,
And Fund 39 is referendum approved debt.
right,
And so that part of the tax levy is not a part of the revenue limit. It's outside of the revenue limit. So,
right.
because of that, the district's able to levy a little bit more in that fund, and then you can do the prepayment of debt. So the district's done this for years and years.
Okay,
Yeah, it was actually brought to us, I don't know, was it 2 years ago, or 3 maybe even, where Baird was saying, yeah, this is a good idea.
Yeah,
And we started doing that for sure then, before that was before me, but
We're prepaying debt. But then we're turning around and going to referendum to ask for more money.
debt, Fund 39 funds can only be used to pay for debt. You cannot use it for anything else.
Okay, so Fund 39 has a pot of money that is specific for paying debt like this, obligations like this. These obligations, regardless of whether or not they're Fund 10, I mean, it's not Fund 10, this is specific for this particular purpose. And we're working with Baird to be able to strategically decide when to pay that debt off so that it reduces the interest expense to the district.
Right,
It's
Okay.
like paying off your mortgage early.
yeah.
right.
Yeah, well, only difference would be like, I pay, let's say I have a $1,500 a month mortgage, right? And there's many different other instruments made up in that particular amount, you know. Yeah. It's good to know.
Mhm. Any other discussion around that? I mean,
Yeah, Mike,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm involved in a conversation like this on a regular basis, whether it be the YMCA's debt at $4.5 million at 4.3 or 4.75%, or my business note, which I was lucky to get at 3%. If I'm reading this right, 2%. And a comment that I have with other fiscal committee members on other fiscal committees is there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. In which case, it's not so much how you can avoid by paying it off early. It's what good are you doing for the organization by, just continuing to pay it on a regular basis. So, my only comment to the fiscal committee here is just don't focus on the savings, focus on the good that we're able to do by keeping it in our regular fund balance and fund operations. And we have to make a decision whether that good is worth the potential savings of paying it off early. I'm not here to argue one way or the other. I'm just letting you know that this is a common question that organizations have. And some people who are fiscal hawks always want to pay off debt just because they don't like the word. And if it's credit card debt at 28%, damn right. However, if it's only 2%, we might be doing better with using it to pay salaries and other operational needs because that's some pretty damn cheap money. And that's my 2 cents on debt.
I hear you and I completely agree. The only thing is that with the school district, it is different than a business. So if we levy in Fund 39, we can't use it for anything else. It has to be kept separate. It's subject to arbitrage and like we literally, it's not part of the cash flow. We can't just use it to pay payroll. So you can keep it in the fund for a short time, but you can't, like, we couldn't carry it in Fund 39 for multiple years. And you can't use it for anything else.
This
Okay,
discussion-
so thanks for the clarification, but if we paid it off early, where's the money come from? Does it come out of our general fund? Where does the money come from to pay it off early?
It comes from the Fund 39 levy. So if you look back, if I was to pull up the revenue limit worksheet, you would see in the line for the Fund 39 levy, it was a little bit over $4 million. Yeah, right here, it's $4.7 million. 1.6 was our regularly scheduled debt payments, about 68,000 was interest, plus another 20,000 in interest. And then that left us with about $3 million out of that levy. So that's just from this year's money. And that's the money that we're talking about right now using to prepay this debt. So it was part of the tax levy, but it was specifically identified as Fund 39.
does this have any bearing on the mill rate?
Yes,
Okay, so we would expect another drop in the mill rate,
correct.
after this gets approved?
Not after this gets approved, but once this debt's paid off, the mill rate will drop.
Okay, so, do we have a calculation what that would be?
Not tonight, no.
No, okay,
Prior to 2031, well, if we prepaid, I mean, I would have to think that brings us just rough estimates, 2 years closer-ish, kind
Yes.
of.
I would say so, yeah. Well, I mean, if we continue on. Oh, I can't read the tiny numbers on this page, but the debt payments themselves go down significantly with this prepayment. So instead of being $1.4 million, they're gonna be more like 140 or $200,000 going forward, which is significant. And then this, if we paid just what the minimum was each year going forward, we will still have this all paid off by 2030, I think it is.
So in the next few years, we could see that mill rate drop. I mean, it's not significant, but it's a drop.
Right, and it will either way, so. Basically, because we've been paying extra on the debt. That is what is making our current referendum only an additional 70 cents on the mill rate. Without that debt, creating that space in the mill rate, it would be $2. This $7 million referendum would be $2 on the mill rate.
okay,
It's the debt payment getting lower. That's gonna give us that space that the jump is only gonna be 70 cents rather than $2. Does that make sense?
because we've been
Yeah.
able to do this for,
For like multiple years.
but, these are all fixed rates then too, with the bonds and that we have,
The interest rates, yeah.
okay. So like fluctuations in the Fed rate or anything like that, the prime rate have nothing to do with this because this is. These
It's
are
locked in.
Locked in. Alright,
That's a good question.
Any other discussion? Are we looking for a motion to bring this to the full board?
Motion.
Got a motion
second,
and a second. I'm just gonna say, does anybody oppose that is going through everything?
No, I think it's a good decision.
All right. Looks like that will be going forward on Monday for an action item. All right, referendum update. This is really just a late discussion. I don't think too much has changed in the last couple of weeks.
No, that you are very right. I guess the main thing I was just going to talk about is the communications that we've been doing around the referendum. So we have the referendum subcommittee that meets. We have an internal referendum group that meets every week. Mailer 1 went out. We had some houses not receive it. I know that Melissa Lampy was looking into that, trying to make sure that that did not happen with mailer number 2, which is getting queued up and getting close to being ready to go out. I don't remember the mail date on that, but that's coming up here pretty fast. We have been going all around the district, doing informal and formal presentations. So different members of central office, some principals, Jared, we've been all over the place, handing out flyers, putting them in business windows, doing the formal presentations. We have lots more of those coming up. I think everybody has that document, so you can sign up if you wish to be at any of those. The Burke briefings are still happening. We have community sessions at each one of the school buildings scheduled. So every school building will have the formal presentation, and it's going to be open to parents, students, community members, whoever wants to be there. We had our focus groups already, which was great. We got some really good feedback, and which we used. Those were very good. And then there's been a lot of social media. I don't know what you'd call it, like roll out, push out, including something that we've been calling a did you know? And so, about 3 times a week, Melissa is posting like 2 or 3 facts, and they're not all referendum related, so there are referendum things in there, but there's also just information about the district, who we are, what we do. So those are out, and then, yeah, I already mentioned that, so I know specifically Melissa, she's been amazing with all of this, but she's trying to make sure that those flyers are in windows all over town, so she has been doing a lot of that work.
And if anybody wants flyers, by all means, talk to Jared. I have a couple left in my truck too. I can share tonight. More than happy to help hand out if you want, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take a stab.
Great point, yeah, all of the materials have the QR code that'll take people right to the website to get more information. And the FAQs are always, like, we're constantly working on those every time we get something new that we're like, yeah, we should really add that in, we're updating and just trying to make sure that we're hitting all the points that people have questions about.
And then, the other thing I'd like to point out too, we all got that email, like you brought it up already. If we want to volunteer to be at any of the spots that are planned, by all means, reference that email. It came out from David. I believe it was from David. And, sign up, right? And I think that should come to the full board on Monday as well, that, hey, let's all sign up where we can. I know I got a busy schedule. You probably got a busy schedule.
Sign up for,
like where they're gonna be all talking at different places.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
whether
I
it be at Biggs or whether it be at Zwigs or, you know, just at the library, places like that. Town will be all talking.
I didn't realize you had to sign up for that. I just show up.
You
They
don't
actually-
really have to
yeah,
sign up,
yeah,
it's
no, you
just
don't
that
have
there
to.
are gaps where
Yeah.
if you're interested in putting your name
Yeah,
in there.
if I may, and Sarah's already spoken to this, I think adequately, but at the last referendum planning meeting on Sunday, or excuse me, Friday morning, Jason and Melissa and the subcommittee, Fred, Mike, and Diana have done a good job of setting a plan for both formal and informal opportunities. Brad Clark was at Main Street Diner this Tuesday morning or Monday morning. And in a conversation with Melissa, sounds like he had a lot of very engaging conversations. I don't know if he shows up and puts a pin on his chest that says, ask me about the referendum, or if he just randomly starts sitting at people's booths and generating conversations. I don't know how he does it. But in those informal events, you know, we want, it's not so much you're putting up a table at Farm and Fleet, but it could be that. At a minimum, I would take direction from Melissa, mainly, who's been doing this more often than anybody else. And I know Charity's already signed up for one of those time slots. So if the board needs guidance on, you know, what they should bring with them or be prepared to answer certain questions, probably go to one with an administrator or staff first. If you're not comfortable signing up for one of them on your own. Yeah, I was pretty pleased with the administration's and the staff's efforts on that front to inform the public. And I figured that it'd be appropriate for the board to chip in and help. Also on there, which wasn't explicitly broken out as being different, but there were several neighborhoods that were listed down towards the end of March. And that's a door-to-door walkathon the weekend before the referendum. So I think out of the 7 or 8 neighborhoods that were identified, only 2 were filled to go door to door and drop off mailers or postcards, what have you. So they're not just all hour-and-a-half engagements sitting on a diner stool at Zwigs. Some might actually require some, you know, walking and knocking on doors and some more one-on-one conversations. But if you're comfortable doing it and you're able, please volunteer.
Thanks, David. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, I'd love to know more information about that. Do you guys have, I mean, you want me just give you a call, David, or do you want me
I
to?
think Melissa's the one, I mean, I would reach out to Melissa, she's really directing the show
Okay.
on this, and she can, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just the conduit, Craig.
Sure.
What I would do is I'd look at that and whatever principal or staff you feel most comfortable with hanging with. And if it's Brad Clark, then just see maybe what the next time Brad Clark signed up for one. If it's Sarah Duncan and whatever she signed up with, go to whatever one she's going with and see what the lay of the land is. I've never done one. So I don't know, but it's not uncommon to find me at Drafty Cellar on a Friday afternoon. Just that this Friday, I'm going to show up with a bunch of postcards.
Pretty much it when we're going to the businesses. So, I'll be at the high school next week. That's going to be the formal presentation. So the ones that are at the school in the evenings, those we're gonna actually give the slideshow at. Otherwise, I think a lot of them, yeah, we're just handing out flyers and whatever the business is comfortable with. So if they want us to set up a table and kind of be out of the way, that's fine. If we mingle among the customers and they don't mind, that's what we're doing. So
Any thought to reaching out to like any parochial schools and or
That was actually
congregations?
discussed on Friday, yeah, and I think Melissa's gonna be following through with that. Cause I think it was David that brought it up, yeah, that it's very important to have them involved as well.
Well, yeah.
And we also brought up the fact that, of reaching to the outlying communities and,
Yes.
to wherever we can outside of just the city of Watertown.
Sure.
But yeah, Craig, I 100% agree. I did bring that up on Friday morning along with all the PTOs at our elementary schools. And I got a line with the climbing canners that tells me I can get 70 families. But I haven't exercised that option yet. Yeah, any group that is a captive audience that has a vested interest should be as informed as we can possibly make them informed.
Okay. And so far with the meetings that we've had, what's the turnout been like?
it hasn't been high at most of them.
Okay,
I think just anecdotally, the most people we've hit so far was when Margaret was at, I think it was trivia night. She got to talk to a lot of people that night. She was really excited about that. And then we have had some pretty good crowds at the Burke briefings. Those have been pretty good. And the focus groups were really good too. We had good turnout for those, so. But like at the different restaurants and things that we've been at, it's been a small crowd.
okay. And is that, cause I mean, I seem to get, like mixed messages from observing what the community is gathering from gleaning from these meetings. They seem to feel like there's one referendum, and so they're conflating the April 1st referendum with a potential ask in the future. So I believe I went to one at the senior center that Jared presented. And that was very much both of them, but people seem to, I don't know. People seem to think that they're still it's one ask, and it's no, if we're gonna ask for fixing up our buildings, that's gonna be quite a bit more than a $7 million.
Yeah,
Right, and we have put in the FAQs. We have a myth versus facts, like one sheet page that's supposed to be coming out, and it's addressed in there as well. And then we do, whenever we present the slideshow, we talk about it.
Okay.
So, I mean, we are definitely trying to help people to understand that. I have heard that too, though, that people are confused.
Yeah.
Craig, your 15 bullet, I'll call it manifesto, should be required reading for anybody who goes to one of these things. For those who didn't see it, Craig put out a very, very nice, well thought out, thorough, accurate. I don't want to call it rebuttal. I don't want to call it response. Let's call it a fact sheet onto Facebook. And that's what I would anticipate, Craig, people asking every single one of those questions and getting every single one of those bullet points confused because they've either been given misinformation or they choose not to pay attention to real information. So I don't think it's ever going to be more hostile nor more civil than what you've already attempted to dispel personally. So once again, I appreciate your efforts there, and you were spot on with all your comments. And I'm pretty sure that that might be the worst of what you run into at Amato's or or Main Street Diner or wherever.
Sure.
Any other discussion? All right, looking at monthly reports, want to give us the highlights? Or,
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say. Let's see. We look at our variance report. This is the Fund 10 variance report. For the most part, we are tracking very close to the last 2 years, percentage wise. The increase here for our wages, so we're at 48% as opposed to 44% last year. We are one payroll ahead of where we were last year just because of the way the calendar fell. Otherwise, pretty much we're really close to the same as the last 2 years, which is really good. As I mentioned earlier, we are obviously projecting a deficit. Last year, we're also projecting a deficit, and we did come in a little bit less than what that deficit was. So hopefully that is what will happen this year again. I don't think it'll be a huge difference. But that is what I am thinking is going to happen. And if we look at Fund 27, it's basically the same thing. Revenue for Fund 27 is kind of not relevant at this point of the year. But yeah, the same thing. So salaries is a little bit higher than where we were last year because of that extra payroll. And otherwise, everything is tracking very close to the same.
all right, any discussions? Questions? I didn't see any come through email, so I'm assuming there isn't anything that stood out to anybody. All right, seeing none, do we do a motion to take that forward, pay bill type thing? Or just go forward, pay bills?
Do we usually do that?
I know, I just did the same thing, I'm having a complete brain fart, like, we always do
No,
a
it's an
motion or not,
action
but,
item.
it's an action item.
Yeah.
Just to cover us, is there a motion
I
to pay
think we
bills?
need a motion, but I'll give you.
Not
All right,
for
I didn't
consideration.
think so either, but okay. Fair enough, we'll pay the bills.
Yep.
Then future agenda planning. We look at the calendar coming up. The only real thing we got in March is referendum planning. I mean, I think that should be at the top of our list every meeting from here forward, but anything else that you guys, minus the day-to-day, that you think we could talk about in March?
You don't have any big contracts coming up or anything, so
No.
that was always the
Yeah,
thing I want to make sure we got ahead of, but.
I could ask Kevin. I don't know if he'll be ready to talk about summer projects next month. But that could be something we could talk about next month.
yeah,
The-
but yeah, that's a good idea.
So last month I mentioned, April, we should probably put a operational referendum debrief on there.
I have that in May, but we could do it in.
Oh,
We could switch
I
it.
missed that. Well, I guess would be, right,
Yeah, it would
because,
make sense to do it in April.
right,
We
because
could do it in
April first
April,
would be
we'll
Do
the,
it in both too.
That'd be
because
good.
You can have the initial information on April, and then I'm sure there will be other information is gonna come to the fiscal committee in May.
right,
Yeah,
so really,
Cause you're gonna, what, 2 weeks after the ballot for the April one, maybe 1 to 2 weeks. So, I mean, you're not gonna have a lot of time there, so it's gonna be initial reactions. In May, at least you'll have a full month to digest and make recommendations.
mhm.
I mean, so there's only really one more month to talk, in March before it goes to referendum,
Before,
so,
yeah, before it's go time, yeah.
okay.
All right, with that being said, can we adjourn? Let's do that at 6:39 then. Fred said yes. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Carrot.
Where everyone's at, let's start that truck again. It's not terrible.